The unseen observer. The hum of refrigerators filled the air of the bustling supermarket, blending with the muffled sound of scattered conversations and the squeak of carts rolling across the white-tiled floor. The scent of fresh-baked bread and strong coffee lingered, but for Mateo Ramirez, it was just another detail lost in the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. Mateo stood at his usual post behind the register, scanning barcodes and greeting customers with a polite nod. His dark curls clung to his forehead with sweat, his simple navy blue polo shirt damp from the warmth inside the store. It was just another day, a long shift filled with impatient stares, whispered complaints, and the ever-growing line of customers who barely acknowledged him. He exhaled slowly, glancing at the digital clock above the exit. 2 more hours before he could clock out. 2 more hours of biting his tongue, of standing still while people treated him as if he were invisible. But then came the man. He was middle-aged, dressed in a tailored business suit that barely disguised his irritation. With a sharp exhale, he slammed a bundle of expensive groceries onto the conveyor belt. Mateo straightened his posture, scanning the items quickly, sensing the tension radiating from the man. "Move faster," the customer snapped. Mateo blinked, tightening his grip on the barcode scanner. "Keep calm. Stay professional." "Yes, sir," he said, his voice even. The man scoffed, rolling his eyes as he pulled out his wallet. "This is ridiculous. They should hire people who can actually do the job properly." Mateo swallowed hard, keeping his gaze lowered. "Just finish the transaction." He scanned the last item and stated the total, but the man barely acknowledged him, shoving his credit card forward with a huff. And then it happened. The card declined. The register beeped loudly, drawing the attention of the customers behind him. Mateo hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. It looks like your card." The man's face flushed red. "Are you serious?" He snatched the card back, waving it furiously. "This is a premium account. Do I look like someone who doesn't have money?" Mateo kept his tone steady. "It could be a connection issue. Would you like to try again?" But the man wasn't listening. His voice rose, slicing through the supermarket noise. "This is your fault. You people," he spat the words with venom, "can't even handle a simple transaction. No wonder you're stuck working here." A tense silence settled in the store. Several shoppers stopped mid-step, their eyes flicking between Mateo and the furious customer. Some averted their gazes, others awkwardly shuffled forward in line. Mateo clenched his jaw. He had heard worse before, but today, something inside him snapped. "I'm just doing my job, sir," he said firmly. The man let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, so now you have an attitude. You should be grateful someone like me even shops here." Mateo's hands curled into fists beneath the counter, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. He forced himself to breathe. But before he could say another word, a voice cut through the tension, low, steady, and unmistakable. "That's enough." The supermarket froze. Mateo's breath caught in his throat as he turned toward the voice. And standing at the edge of the aisle, watching the entire scene unfold, was Keanu Reeves, the silent guardian. The supermarket had never been this quiet. Even the usual background noise, the distant hum of refrigerators, the rhythmic beeping of checkout scanners, the chatter of customers, seemed to fade into nothing. Every pair of eyes turned toward the man who had just spoken. Keanu Reeves. Dressed in dark jeans and a simple black t-shirt, he stood with an air of quiet authority. His signature long hair rested on his shoulders, and behind his ever-present sunglasses, there was an unmistakable intensity. He wasn't just an actor in this moment. He was someone who had seen enough. The arrogant businessman, still flustered and red-faced, turned to Keanu with a mixture of irritation and confusion. "Excuse me, who do you think you are?" Keanu took a slow step forward, his hands still casually tucked into his pockets. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. But his presence alone was enough to shift the energy in the room. "I think I'm someone who just watched you humiliate a hardworking man for no reason." Keanu said, his voice even. A few customers murmured among themselves. Matteo, still behind the register, gripped the counter's edge. His chest felt tight, not from fear, but from something else. Someone was standing up for him. The businessman scoffed, shaking his head. "Oh, come on. You don't even know what happened. This kid screwed up the transaction." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "That's not what I saw." Matteo's breath hitched. The businessman chuckled dryly, still oblivious to who he was speaking to. "And what are you? Some kind of morality police? I don't need a lecture from some." Then recognition hit. The man's expression shifted as he took a closer look at Keanu. His smirk faltered. His posture stiffened. Keanu sighed, finally breaking eye contact with him and turning his attention toward Matteo. "You okay, kid?" he asked. Matteo blinked. It was a simple question, but one that no one had asked him in a long time. "Yes, sir," he said automatically. Keanu's gaze held his for a moment longer, searching. Then he nodded. "Good." But Matteo wasn't good. Not really. He had spent so many shifts swallowing his frustration, accepting the mistreatment as part of the job, convincing himself that it was just normal. Yet now someone, Keanu freaking Reeves, was telling him it wasn't. The businessman cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I don't want any trouble." Keanu held up a hand. "Then take your groceries and go." The man opened his mouth, then closed it again. He grabbed his bag, avoiding Keanu's eyes, and stormed out of the store, his shoes clicking loudly against the tiles. The tension broke. A wave of hushed murmurs spread through the supermarket. Some customers who had been silent during the confrontation suddenly found their voices. "That was incredible. I can't believe he stood up for the cashier. Wait, was that really Keanu Reeves?" Matteo let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the next customer's items. He needed to shake this off. He needed to keep working. But Keanu wasn't done yet. Instead of walking away, he stepped closer to the register. "What's your name?" Matteo swallowed. "Matteo. Matteo Ramirez." Keanu nodded. "Nice to meet you, Matteo." Matteo's fingers twitched against the register keys. He wasn't sure what to say. It was Keanu Reeves, for crying out loud. Keanu glanced around the store before turning back to him. "How long have you been working here?" Matteo hesitated. "About 2 years." Keanu hummed thoughtfully, then asked, "You like it?" Matteo hesitated again. The truth was no, not really. He worked here because he had to, because his family needed the money, because college wasn't an option right now, because jobs weren't easy to come by for someone like him. But he couldn't just say that. So instead, he gave a neutral answer. "It pays the bills." Keanu studied him for a moment, then offered a small smile. "I get it." And somehow, Matteo believed him. It wasn't just something polite that rich people said to sound relatable. It felt real. "Listen," Keanu said, leaning slightly against the counter. "I saw what happened back there. You handled yourself well. A lot of people would have snapped, but you kept your cool." Matteo let out a dry laugh. "Not like I had a choice." Keanu tilted his head. "You always have a choice." Something about the way he said it made Matteo pause. He had been making choices. Every time he let someone belittle him without saying anything. Every time he convinced himself it wasn't worth standing up for himself. Every time he bit his tongue instead of speaking. That was a choice. Keanu straightened. "You get off soon." Matteo blinked. In about 2 hours." Keanu checked his watch. "You on break?" Matteo glanced at the store manager, who had been suspiciously silent during the entire ordeal. But the man, clearly shaken by the presence of a celebrity in his store, nodded quickly. "Yeah, take a break." Matteo hesitated. Keanu gestured toward the small cafe section near the front of the store. "Come grab a coffee with me." Matteo's eyes widened. Was this really happening? He hesitated only for a second before untucking his store polo and stepping around the counter. The whispers followed them as they made their way to a table near the windows, but Matteo barely heard them. His mind was still reeling. A few minutes ago, he was just another invisible cashier, another worker people ignored or mistreated. Now, he was sitting across from Keanu Reeves, sharing coffee like old friends. Matteo gripped his cup, unsure of what to say. He had so many questions. Why had Keanu stepped in? Why had he noticed him? Why was he still here? But before he could ask, Keanu took a sip of his coffee and leaned forward slightly. "Matteo," he said, his voice calm but serious. "Have you ever thought about doing something different?" Matteo frowned. "Different?" Keanu nodded. "A job that makes you happy, something you actually love doing." Matteo's stomach twisted. "I mean, sure. But that's not really an option for me." Keanu didn't break eye contact. "Why not?" Matteo let out a short, humorless laugh. "Because life doesn't work like that. Because dreams don't pay bills. Because some people don't get options." Keanu stirred his coffee slowly, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he said something that made Matteo's breath catch. "What if I told you that's not true?" Matteo frowned. "I don't." Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His voice was gentle, but there was something unshakable behind it. "You remind me of someone I used to know," Keanu admitted. "Someone who thought they were stuck in life. But they weren't." He tilted his head. "And I don't think you are either." Matteo's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. His pulse quickened. Keanu wasn't just being nice. He wasn't just making conversation. He was offering something more. And Matteo had no idea what to do next. The offer that changes everything. Matteo stared at Keanu Reeves, his mind racing. This had to be some kind of dream, a glitch in reality, a moment his exhausted brain had made up to escape the mundane cycle of work and survival. But no, the warmth of the coffee in his hands was real. The hushed murmurs of people still sneaking glances at them were real. The man sitting across from him, Hollywood's most beloved star, speaking to him like they were equals. Real. Matteo swallowed hard, trying to process what Keanu had just said. "You think I'm not stuck?" he repeated cautiously. Keanu nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. His expression was calm, but there was something intentional about the way he spoke, like every word mattered. "Yeah," Keanu said simply. "I don't think you're stuck, Matteo. I think you've been convinced that you are." Matteo exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "With all due respect, sir." "Keanu," the actor corrected with a small smile. "Just Keanu." Matteo hesitated. "Keanu, I don't think you understand. People like me, we don't get a choice. We work jobs like this because we have to. It's not about what we want." Keanu leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Who told you that?" Matteo blinked. "I mean, it's just the way things are." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "No, it's the way you were told things are." Matteo felt something tighten in his chest. He wanted to argue, but was Keanu wrong? Ever since he was a kid, life had been about survival. His parents had worked multiple jobs just to make ends meet. College had been out of the question. Too expensive, too risky. So he had done what was expected. Found a stable job, kept his head down, and learned to endure. But now, Keanu freaking Reeves, was sitting in front of him, looking him in the eye, telling him that it didn't have to be this way. Matteo let out a shaky breath. "Even if I wanted something different, what could I even do?" Keanu studied him for a moment, as if carefully choosing his words. "Well," he finally said, "let's start with the basics. What do you love to do?" Matteo opened his mouth, then closed it. He had spent so long focused on just getting through the day that he had never really thought about it. Keanu's lips quirked into a small smile. It's been a while since anyone asked you that, hasn't it? Matteo gave a half laugh. More like, ever. Keanu nodded, unsurprised. All right, let's try this another way. He drummed his fingers against the table. If money wasn't an issue, if you didn't have to worry about bills, rent, or anything like that, what would you do every day that would make you excited to wake up? Matteo hesitated. The idea seemed impossible, but Keanu wasn't asking him to be realistic. He was asking him to dream. After a moment, Matteo exhaled. I love working with my hands, he admitted. Building things, fixing things. My abuelo used to teach me how to repair stuff when I was a kid. Cars, furniture, even electronics. Keanu's eyes lit up. That's a skill, he said firmly. And a valuable one. Matteo scoffed. It's not like I could make a career out of it. Keanu raised an eyebrow. Why not? Matteo looked down at his coffee, swirling the liquid inside. Because I wouldn't even know where to start. I barely have time to breathe, let alone figure out how to change my whole life. Keanu tapped a thoughtful finger against his cup. What if someone helped you? Matteo frowned. Helped me how? Keanu leaned forward slightly. I know people, he said. People who can teach you, mentor you. People who started with nothing and built their careers with their own two hands. Matteo's throat went dry. Wait, what are you saying? Keanu shrugged casually. I'm saying I could introduce you to them. Matteo stared at him. You'd do that for me? Keanu's expression turned serious. Matteo, I stepped in today because I saw someone being mistreated when they didn't deserve it. But I stayed because I saw something else. Matteo swallowed. What? Keanu leaned back. I saw a young man who's smart, patient, and capable. A guy who stood there, kept his composure, and didn't lash out even when he was being disrespected. You have something a lot of people don't. Matteo felt heat rise to his face. I don't know if that's... Keanu raised a hand. And I also see someone who's been told his whole life that his dreams don't matter, that he should just take what he's given. His expression darkened. I hate that. Matteo had no words. Keanu let out a breath. So here's the deal, he said, his tone shifting. I'll make a few calls. Get you in touch with people who can help. No promises, no guarantees. Just an opportunity. Matteo's heart pounded. And if I say no? Keanu gave him a small smile. Then you go back to what you were doing before. No hard feelings. Matteo looked down at his hands. The idea was terrifying. A new path, an unknown future. What if he failed? But then he thought about the alternative. Another year behind the register. Another year of swallowing his frustration, feeling invisible, watching customers talk down to him. Another year of waking up every morning dreading the day ahead. Keanu was offering him something different. A chance. Matteo licked his lips, then met Keanu's gaze. His voice was shaky, but there was a fire inside him that hadn't been there before. What do I have to do? Keanu's smile widened. He leaned forward, extending a hand. Say yes. Matteo took a deep breath and shook his hand. The moment he did, something inside him shifted. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving. He was choosing. And something told him that this was only the beginning. A leap into the unknown. Matteo Ramirez had never done anything reckless in his life. He had always been the responsible one. The guy who showed up to work on time, who picked up extra shifts when someone called out, who never asked for more than what he was given. But now, as he shook hands with Keanu Reeves, committing to a future he hadn't even imagined before today, something inside him shifted. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Keanu leaned back in his chair, finishing the last sip of his coffee. All right, he said, standing up. Let's get started. Matteo blinked. Wait. Right now. Keanu raised an eyebrow, a small smirk playing on his lips. You waiting for next week? Next month? Next year? Matteo hesitated. I mean, I still have my shift. Keanu turned toward the register, where Matteo's manager stood awkwardly, trying to act like he hadn't been eavesdropping on the whole conversation. Keanu gave the man a casual nod. You okay if Matteo takes the rest of the day off? The manager, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a permanent look of exhaustion, visibly panicked. Yes, of course, Mr. Reeves. Absolutely. Take all the time you need. Matteo almost laughed. The same manager who never approved last-minute schedule changes was suddenly thrilled to let him go. Keanu turned back to Matteo, shrugging. Looks like you're free. Matteo exhaled. This is really happening. He quickly clocked out, grabbed his jacket from the employee break room, and followed Keanu out of the supermarket. The moment they stepped outside, the cool afternoon breeze hit him, and for the first time in years, he felt light. No weight on his shoulders, no anxiety about finishing his shift, just possibility. Keanu led him to a sleek black motorcycle parked in front of the store. Matteo's eyes widened. Is that a Arch KRGT1? Keanu confirmed, patting the seat. Custom built. Want a ride? Matteo hesitated for only a second before nodding. Hell yeah. Keanu chuckled and tossed him an extra helmet. Hop on. As Matteo climbed onto the back of the bike, gripping the sides of the seat, he realized something crazy. He had never been on a motorcycle before. But before he could dwell on that, Keanu revved the engine. And they took off. A ride to the future. The wind rushed past them, and Matteo felt his heart hammering against his ribs, not from fear, but from something else. Something wild. Something free. The city streets blurred as they weaved through traffic, the low rumble of the bike echoing off the pavement. Matteo had always felt stuck in one place, like life was a treadmill he couldn't get off. But now he was moving. After about 20 minutes, Keanu pulled into a quiet street lined with auto repair shops, vintage garages, and industrial buildings. He parked outside a modest-looking workshop, the kind of place that smelled like grease, metal, and ambition. Matteo climbed off, still buzzing from the ride. Where are we? Keanu removed his helmet, running a hand through his long hair. A friend's place. As they walked toward the workshop, the doors slid open, revealing a bustling garage filled with motorcycles, classic cars, and half-finished projects. Inside, several people were working, some welding, some tuning engines, some arguing over blueprints. And then, a large man with a thick beard and oil-stained overalls turned around. Well, the man said, wiping his hands on a rag. Didn't expect to see you today, Keanu. Keanu grinned, had a change of plans, Marcus. Marcus squinted at Matteo. And who's this? Keanu clapped Matteo on the back. This is Matteo. He's looking for something new. Matteo shifted under Marcus's intense gaze. The man looked like the kind of guy who had seen everything and tolerated nothing. You got experience? Marcus asked. Matteo nodded. A little. I used to work with my abuelo on cars and repairs when I was younger. Marcus grunted. That's a start. But this isn't a hobby shop. We build, we restore, we create. You sure you can handle it? Matteo straightened his posture. He didn't know everything, but he knew this. Unwilling to learn, he said firmly. Marcus held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded. Good answer. Keanu smirked. Told you he was solid. Marcus crossed his arms. All right, kid. Let's see what you got. Grab some gloves. Matteo blinked. Wait. Right now. Marcus shrugged. What you waiting for next week? Next month? Next year? Matteo laughed. Keanu had said the exact same thing. He grabbed the gloves. The first test. The next few hours were a blur. Matteo was thrown into the deep end immediately. No training videos, no paperwork, just work. He was put on a basic restoration job, tasked with helping clean, polish, and fix an old 1967 Mustang that had been sitting in the garage for months. At first, he felt out of place. These guys knew what they were doing, moving with a level of confidence he didn't have. But then, he remembered. The summers spent with his abuelo, holding a wrench with greasy hands. The satisfaction of tightening a bolt just right. The way an old engine came back to life with the right touch. And just like that, Mateo clicked in. By the time the sun started to set, Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Not bad, kid." Mateo grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Thanks." Marcus turned to Keanu. "He's got potential." Keanu nodded. "Told you." Mateo wiped his hands on a rag, his mind racing. He had come here on a whim, riding on nothing but a conversation and a gut feeling. Now, he had just spent hours doing something he loved, something that felt right. And for the first time in years, he wasn't just existing. He was building something. Keanu slung an arm around Mateo's shoulders. "So, what do you think?" Mateo looked around the garage, the tools, the cars, the people who worked with passion instead of just obligation. And then he looked at Keanu, the man who had seen something in him when no one else did. Mateo inhaled deeply. "I think," he said slowly, "this is where I'm meant to be." Keanu smiled. "Then let's make it happen." Forging a new path. Mateo woke up the next morning with aching muscles and an unfamiliar sense of excitement thrumming through his veins. He wasn't dreading the day. For the first time in years, he wasn't waking up to another endless shift behind the register, another day of biting his tongue and feeling invisible. No, today he was heading back to the garage. The thought alone sent an adrenaline rush through him. He quickly threw on a plain black t-shirt and some jeans, his supermarket uniform already forgotten, and caught a bus to the auto shop. The ride felt different today. The city didn't seem so dull. The world didn't seem so closed off. Maybe because, for the first time, he wasn't just surviving. He was building something real. A trial by fire. When Mateo arrived at the garage, the place was already buzzing with activity. Marcus was barking orders at a younger mechanic about a motorcycle frame, while another guy, Jesse, if Mateo remembered correctly, was adjusting a carburetor on a classic muscle car. The smell of oil, grease, and burning metal filled the air. But to Mateo, it wasn't just a smell. It was the scent of possibility. Marcus barely looked up from his work as Mateo entered. "You're late." Mateo checked the time. "I'm 15 minutes early." Marcus smirked. "Exactly. You should be here 30 minutes early." Mateo blinked, then grinned. "Got it." Marcus nodded toward a half-dismantled motorcycle in the corner of the shop. "That's yours today." Mateo's eyes widened. "Wait, you're letting me work on a bike?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm letting you take it apart and put it back together." Mateo exhaled. This was real. This wasn't just a job. It was a test. Could he handle it? Would he fail? Would he prove that he belonged here? Taking a deep breath, he walked over to the workbench, grabbed a pair of gloves, and got to work. The art of the machine. At first, Mateo felt the same self-doubt creeping in. He wasn't a professional mechanic. He didn't have certifications or years of experience. The guys in the shop knew their craft like second nature, and here he was, some ex-cashier trying to prove himself. But then, his hands touched the engine, and he remembered. His abuelo's voice guiding him through his first car repair as a kid. "Every machine has a soul, Mateo," his grandfather used to say. "It's all about respect. If you take care of it, it'll take care of you." Those words resonated now more than ever. Piece by piece, Mateo disassembled the motorcycle, his fingers working from muscle memory rather than logic. He examined the wiring, took apart the brake system, carefully set aside the gears. It wasn't perfect. He was still figuring things out, but he could feel the rhythm of the work. Hours passed in a blur. Marcus walked by occasionally, peeking over Mateo's shoulder, but not saying much. Matteo knew that meant he was watching, testing him, evaluating if he was worth the time. When Matteo finally stepped back, covered in grease and sweat, the bike was completely disassembled. Marcus inspected his work, running a hand over the parts laid out on the bench. "You didn't rush," Marcus finally said. "Didn't force anything." "That's good." Matteo wiped his forehead. "Thanks." Marcus crossed his arms. "Now put it back together." Matteo blinked. "Wait. Right now." Marcus grinned. "What you waiting for next week? Next month? Next year?" Matteo laughed, because now he recognized the pattern. This wasn't just about fixing bikes. This was about mindset. Matteo cracked his knuckles. "All right, let's do this." Lessons in failure. Rebuilding the bike wasn't as smooth as taking it apart. Matteo made mistakes. He accidentally reinstalled the part backwards, forcing him to redo the entire section. He struggled with aligning the wheels properly, leading to Marcus shaking his head and making him restart. At one point, Jesse walked by, watching Matteo struggle with a bolt. "Dude," Jesse chuckled, "you gotta use the torque wrench, not brute force. You're not arm wrestling it." Matteo groaned. "I think the bolt is winning." Jesse tossed him the correct tool. "That'll make it easier." Matteo took the wrench, and after a few tries, finally got it right. It took hours, but eventually the bike was whole again. Matteo stepped back, wiping grease off his hands, heart pounding. Marcus inspected the motorcycle closely, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "Not bad," he said. Matteo let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Really?" Marcus shrugged. "Still needs some fine-tuning, but yeah, you did good." Matteo grinned. Jesse clapped him on the back. "Man, you just rebuilt a bike on your first day. Not bad at all." Keanu, who had been watching from the sidelines, walked over and smirked. "Told you he had it in him." Marcus shook his head but smiled slightly. Yeah, guess you were right." Matteo, exhausted but ecstatic, felt something click inside him. He belonged here. He wasn't just some random supermarket worker anymore. He was a builder, a creator, a mechanic, a new future. As the sun began to set outside the garage, Keanu and Matteo stood near the shop entrance, looking out at the city beyond. "You did good today," Keanu said, arms crossed. Matteo chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, I haven't worked this hard in a long time." Keanu smirked. "Feels good though, doesn't it?" Matteo thought about it. The exhaustion was real. His arms ached, his back was sore, and his fingers were covered in grease. But so was the satisfaction. He wasn't tired because he was drained. He was tired because he had spent the day doing something that mattered. "Yeah," he admitted, "it really does." Keanu pulled something from his jacket pocket and tossed it to Matteo. Matteo caught it, frowning. A small metal key rested in his palm. His eyes widened. "Is this?" Keanu nodded toward a bike in the corner of the shop. A beautiful, half-restored motorcycle, sleek and powerful, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. "It's yours," Keanu said simply, "if you're up for the challenge." Matteo stared at the key, then at the bike, then at Keanu. He wasn't dreaming. This was real. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was his new life, and he was ready to embrace it. Rising from the ashes, Matteo held the small metal key in his palm, staring at it like it was some kind of mystical artifact. This wasn't just a key. It was an opportunity, a challenge, a symbol of everything he had worked for. A half-restored motorcycle sat in the corner of the garage, its frame battered but still holding on, just like him. Keanu Reeves stood beside him, arms crossed, watching Matteo's reaction with an amused glint in his eyes. "Well," Keanu asked, "you gonna stand there all day, or are you gonna get to work?" Matteo swallowed hard. He wasn't used to this. People giving him a chance, expecting him to rise to the occasion, instead of just accepting his place in life. But this wasn't the supermarket. This wasn't a dead-end job with no future. This was his new life, and he wasn't about to waste it. He clenched the key in his fist and turned to Marcus. "All right, where do I start?" Marcus smirked. "Now you're talking." A machine reborn. The next 2 weeks were a grueling test of Matteo's skill, patience, and determination. Restoring a motorcycle from scratch wasn't a simple task. The engine was shot, the fuel system was clogged, and the frame had so much rust it looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of the ocean. Marcus handed him a checklist of everything that needed to be rebuilt, replaced, or reworked. Matteo read through it, exhaling slowly. "This is a lot." Marcus grinned. "Welcome to the real world, kid." And so it began. The art of the rebuild. Day after day, hour after hour, Matteo immersed himself in the work. Some nights, he left the shop with aching muscles and grease-streaked hands, but he didn't care. He loved it. Every bolt he tightened, every gear he aligned, every problem he solved felt like another step forward, another piece of himself coming back to life. Keanu stopped by the shop frequently, watching Matteo work and offering advice when needed. Patience, Keanu reminded him one evening as Matteo struggled with a stubborn carburetor. Machines aren't just metal. They're like people. They need respect. Matteo exhaled, steadying his hands. Slowly, carefully, he adjusted the part. Click. The carburetor locked into place perfectly. Matteo grinned. "I think I got it." Keanu clapped him on the shoulder. "Told you." Facing doubts. But not everything was smooth sailing. There were moments when the self-doubt crept in. One night, as he struggled with the engine, Jesse leaned against the workbench, watching him with a smirk. "You ever think you're in over your head?" Jess asked. Matteo wiped sweat from his forehead. "Every damn day." Jesse laughed. "Good. That means you're learning." Matteo chuckled, but the question stuck with him. Was he really cut out for this? Could a guy like him, who had spent years feeling like a nobody, really change his fate? That night, as he lay in bed, exhaustion weighing on him, he thought about giving up. Maybe this was all a fluke. Maybe he was just fooling himself. But then he thought about the supermarket. The way customers ignored him. The way that businessmen humiliated him. The way Keanu stepped in, not because Matteo was weak, but because he was worth standing up for. Matteo sat up in bed, exhaling sharply. No, he wasn't going back to that life. The turning point. One night, Marcus handed Matteo a small piece of paper. "What's this?" Matteo asked. Marcus smirked. "Your first official job." Matteo's eyes widened as he read the details. Someone had brought in a bike for repairs. Not a practice job, not a side project, but a real customer's motorcycle. Marcus leaned against the tool bench, crossing his arms. "You've been busting your ass in here. Time to see if you can handle the pressure." Matteo's hands shook slightly as he read the job order. This wasn't just about fixing a bike. This was his test. He took a deep breath. "I won't let you down." Marcus grinned. "We'll see." The final test. Matteo worked on the customer's bike all night. He double-checked every bolt, every adjustment, every little detail. This wasn't just about making sure the bike ran. This was about proving he was worth this chance. When he finally finished, Marcus walked over and inspected the work. Matteo held his breath. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus stepped back and nodded. "Good work, kid." Matteo's heart soared. Jesse patted him on the back. "Looks like you're one of us now." Keanu, who had been watching from the sideline, smirked. "I knew you could do it." Matteo grinned. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged. A life transformed. That night, Matteo stood outside the garage, staring at the city lights. Keanu walked up beside him, hands in his pockets. You happy? Keanu asked. Matteo exhaled. Yeah, I think I am. Keanu nodded. Then keep going. Matteo turned to him. Keanu, why did you do this? Why me? Keanu smiled. Because I see potential, and because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it. Matteo thought about that. Life wasn't about where you started. It was about who gave you a chance and what you did with it. Matteo looked down at the key in his hand. The bike he had restored. The job he had just nailed. He had found his place. And he wasn't looking back. A legacy in motion. The sound of the engine roaring to life sent chills down Matteo's spine. The bike he rebuilt, the one that had sat in the garage, waiting for someone to give it a second chance, was finally alive again. And so was he. Marcus, Jesse, and the rest of the crew stood nearby, watching as Matteo revved the throttle, the deep growl of the engine filling the air. Keanu stood with his arms crossed, a small smile on his face. You did it, he said. Matteo looked down at his hands, hands that had once been used only for scanning barcodes, bagging groceries, and enduring humiliation. Now they had built something real. And this was just the beginning. One last lesson. After shutting off the engine, Matteo hopped off the bike and wiped his hands on a rag. He was exhausted, but in the best way possible. Marcus walked over and gave the bike a once-over. Not bad, kid, he muttered. Jesse grinned. You're officially one of us now. Matteo chuckled. Guess that means I get a raise, huh? The whole garage laughed, even Marcus. Keanu stepped forward, clapping a hand on Matteo's shoulder. I think it's time you take it for a ride. Matteo blinked. Wait, me. Keanu nodded. You built it. You brought it back to life. It's only right that you're the first one to take it on the road. Matteo swallowed hard. This wasn't just a test ride. This was a symbol. A moment that meant he had truly crossed over from the life he used to live to the one he had chosen. Marcus tossed him a helmet. Don't wreck it. Matteo smirked. No promises. The ride of a lifetime. As he threw his leg over the seat and gripped the handlebars, Matteo felt his heart pound in his chest. He took a deep breath, remembering everything Keanu and Marcus had taught him. And then, he kicked the bike into gear and took off. The moment the wheels hit the pavement, Matteo felt something he had never felt before. Freedom. Not just freedom from a bad job, not just freedom from a life of limitations, but real, undeniable, untouchable freedom. The wind tore through his hair as he sped down the road, the engine humming beneath him like a living thing. For so long, he had felt stuck. For so long, he had felt like his life was pre-written, that he would always be the kid behind the counter, invisible to the world. But now he was moving forward. Now he was unstoppable. A full circle moment. After about an hour of riding, Matteo found himself pulling into a familiar parking lot. He killed the engine, took off his helmet, and looked up. The supermarket, the place where he had once felt powerless. The place where he had been humiliated, ignored, and told he wasn't worth more than this job. He thought about the Matteo who used to work here, the one who thought he had no choices, the one who believed this was all he would ever have. And then he smiled, because that Matteo was gone. As he stood there, the automatic doors of the supermarket slid open, and out walked someone he recognized immediately, the businessman who had once humiliated him. The man barely noticed Matteo at first. But then, as he walked past, he caught a glimpse of the motorcycle, the leather jacket, and the undeniable confidence in Matteo's stance. He paused. Matteo smirked. Nice day, isn't it? The businessman's brows furrowed slightly, as if trying to place where he had seen Matteo before. And then, recognition flashed across his face. Matteo saw the moment he realized who he was looking at. But Matteo didn't wait for a response. He put his helmet back on, swung his leg over the bike, and started the engine. Then, with one last glance at the supermarket, the place that had once trapped him, he sped off into the night, leaving his past in the dust. The legacy of a kindness. Back at the garage, Keanu and Marcus were waiting for him. "How was it?" Keanu asked. Matteo took off his helmet and grinned. "Better than I ever imagined." Keanu chuckled. "Told you." Marcus nodded approvingly. "You're ready." Matteo frowned. "Ready for what?" Marcus pulled out a set of papers and handed them to him. Matteo's eyes widened. "An apprenticeship contract." Marcus crossed his arms. "You've been working your ass off. It's time to make this official." Matteo felt his hands shake as he held the papers. A real job, a real future, a real chance to be something more. Keanu clapped him on the back. "So, what do you say?" Matteo swallowed hard. He thought back to who he was just a few weeks ago. A kid who thought he had no options. A kid who thought his life would always be small. But now he was a builder, a creator, a man who had taken his life into his own hands. He looked at Marcus, then at Keanu, and then he signed the papers. A new beginning. That night, as he sat on the roof of the garage, looking up at the stars, Matteo felt something he had never felt before. Not just hope, not just happiness, but purpose. Keanu sat beside him, sipping a beer. "You did good, Matteo." Matteo smirked. "You think so?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah. And one day, someone else is going to need a chance, and you'll be the one to give it to them." Matteo let that sink in. He wasn't just changing his own life. He was starting a legacy. He looked at Keanu, then back at the sky. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't wondering what was next. He knew.